refugees. Terrific to see New South Wales leading the conversation to open doors to persecuted minorities that are coming, for instance, from Syria. Then there's also a very live discussion, particularly now, about homeland security. So how, as a leader of this state, do you reconcile, along with the fellow members of the Cabinet and government and the federal government as well, how do we walk that fine line in your mind between humanitarian aid and national security?
Well, I don't see it as much of a fine line in the sense that what's our first and primary responsibility, I think, is a humanitarian cause is devastating, as we've seen in terms of those refugees, which has, for now a number of years, created this unprecedented displacement. As a part of humanity, we have a role and responsibility to look after those in the most desperate circumstances. So that's the starting point. And you're right, I'm very proud of what the federal government did in terms of the response. Our commitment to take 12,000, which is actually more than the United States has agreed to take, and now they're reconsidering that position, I think goes exactly to the character of our country. And I couldn't be prouder. As an Australian, when I see us being generous and caring to those most in need, it's when I think we're at our greatest. At the same time, the people that are coming, there are genuine and legitimate security concerns. So if you start on that first base and then move on to the second, so we are going to take people, no questions, but of course we have to be prudent and responsible in the selection of those individuals and making sure in every possible way. I mean, obviously you can't give 100% assurance, but you can go through a whole significant, comprehensive process that ensures that the risk is taken out as much as possible. And that's exactly what we should do. And the federal government has said that they're considering taking additional time in terms of the processing, and I think that is an entirely appropriate response. So the fine line is pretty simple in my mind. Yes, we're taking you, but we need to ensure that the appropriate security checks are done, and I think that's the right response.
Is Sydney ready to welcome, do you think, the kinds of people who are coming from the kind of tormented backgrounds that they're going to be coming from?
Yeah, look, I think it is. I genuinely think it is. And people talk about the number. I mean, look, it is a number. I mean, how many in New South Wales? Somewhere between 4,000 to 6,000 to 7,000. And I said we're prepared to take more than our fair share, and I strongly believe that. But on a relative basis, we expect 1 million people to come into Sydney over the next 10 years. So it's a relatively small amount in terms of the broad population growth. And at the same time, there's been this amazing rallying call, and I've been inundated, a lot of constructive feedback, but also inundated with a lot of people that said, look, I want to play a role. And, my local community, the Northern Beaches, there was a meeting on the weekend, 200 people came along. And the meeting was a collection from people from churches and groups that said, we want to play a role. So who's going to line up for mentoring? Who's going to line up for accommodation? Who can provide financial assistance? What services have we got to support them? Jobs. I mean, all of that, that's just, they're prepared to take 100 to 200 there, and that is being replicated across this city and across the state. Other sort of town mayors, regional mayors have got in touch and they want to play a role. One sort of man got in touch and said he owned a hotel, 54-room hotel, and he was willing to clear it all out and to make it available as part of what we're doing as a state. So I've been very heartened by so many people saying, you know what, we do have an obligation to look after people most vulnerable, and there, by the grace of God, go I. Imagine if I was in that position. And often that's, I think, one of the most challenging. Put yourself in those images you've seen on TV and imagine what that's like. And, grab your son and your daughter and whoever else you have and walk those steps, and how would you like to be treated? And I think that is what is striking at the heart of the many good people we have here.